Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD Podcast. Tro, good to connect again, man. Happy Good Friday to you.
Yeah, yeah, happy. Oh my God, it's one of those days. Happy to connect, Brian. It's been a fun morning this morning. Texas to get my medical license renewed, sent me to get fingerprinted, so that was fun. It's just awesome. We got some good news this morning. Some good news this morning. A new food addiction paper was published by Dr. Jen Unwin and a team, and a consensus is coming soon also. So that's huge. I think that's pretty huge. And then another bit of good news, Kevin Hall left the NIH, so we can all, do a victory lap. I hate to see, I'm sure he'll be fine. I've already seen him do interviews on CNN and MSNBC. I'm happy that we can find some other researchers, now after 20 years of sort of lackluster results in the nutrition and sort of preventative care department. So some interesting changes, Brian. But I'm excited today. You know, Mr. Hartman, God, I've known him maybe for a couple of years now, maybe 5 years. Um, we've been sort of interacting. Before he started his practice, we started connecting. Very interesting story, which I think all the listeners are going to love to hear about. He sort of grew up with parents from a all sort of medicine sort of upbringing, and then he ultimately sort of he had certainly some tennis prowess and definitely prowess in sports. If you've seen him with the shirt off, hide your wife. Um, but but he then went off and got a degree in exercise science and became a PA. And he also kind of followed our suit, Brian. He wanted to break off and go direct. And he's been direct for a number of years now. And some cool stuff in his practice, which I hope he tells us more about. I believe he's got a gym,
Yeah.
and he's got a couple other PAs and docs that are working with him. So I'm excited today to hear all about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dr. Joe. I mean, this was we connected a long time ago through social media. I love your social media because you call out people. You're not afraid to get into fights, and I love watching the drama. It's amazing. So keep up the good work.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's drama free though. It's just drama free. We just call it like it is,
yeah.
like today when Kevin Hall, he just published a study, maybe a month ago, where he looked at, brains at 30 minutes and at 60 minutes and 90 minutes, regarding like food addiction and the avidity, uh, of people, and PET scans and MRI findings within 60 minutes and 90 minutes when we've known for years it's basically 2 hours, right? It takes 2 hours for that postprandial dip to come, which is what causes the sort of avidity and the dopamine surge, right? That postprandial dip, which is 2 hours. In fact, we've known that since 1953, and this guy publishes a study for 90 minutes. He is like the the ultimate detractor. So we just call it out how it is. It's not a fight. It's not a drama. Just call it out how it is, which is a terrible waste of NIH dollars. And happy to see him move on. So
Yeah.
the hate ends there. Now
Good
let's talk
riddance.
about you. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned my upbringing. I had quite the unconventional upbringing, being, yeah, I was born in Texas, and at the time, my mom tried to send me to school to like kindergarten, but I was very energetic, and the teacher thought I had ADHD or something, wanted to put me on Ritalin because I was fighting the boys on the playground. Fighting. I was wrestling with them. I was, a naturally energetic young boy. So instead of putting me on Ritalin and bringing me to a pediatrician, and mind you, I've never been to a pediatrician in my entire life. I never had a well child check, and I never had a vaccine until I had to go to, medical training. So she just pulled me out of there. And, my dad is a German aerospace engineer. And they're like, all right, let's just go contracting in Europe. And that was my childhood. We lived in Italy. So we went from Texas to Italy. And that was a shocker. I was 8 years old in Italy. And my mother enrolled me in judo since I love to fight. And so that's what I did, and that's how I learned Italian. I was from Texas. I knew zero Italian. But the developing child brain, it was like a sponge. I learned Italian by trading Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon cards in the back room with the boys in judo. And then from judo, I got involved in tennis through a connection there. And then tennis became the predominant sport throughout the rest of my life. And I still play to this day at the pro circuit level. I actually played a professional event, a pre-qualification this week. So still highly active in that. And we were homeschooled the entire time in Italy. So we were educated at home, unconventional upbringing. It wasn't like a formal homeschooling. It was more like an unschooling where we kind of learned what we wanted to learn. I really didn't learn how to read until age 9. And the only reason I picked up a book and read it was because I wanted to play this real-time strategy game called Age of Empires. And I didn't know how to play it because it's obtusely complicated. So I just read the manual from front to back, and that's how I started reading. And then you'd never find me without a book. So, it never had she never like forced me to read or anything. I just decided one day to do it. And so that was my upbringing. And you could unschool or homeschool in Italy. It was in their constitution, but the Italians don't read their own constitution, but it's perfectly legal in Italy. It's not legal in Germany. So that's where we went next to Germany. It was the next contract my dad got. And we were in Berlin, and homeschooling is illegal. You can have your children taken away from you. There were cases where children were put in mental institutions for rehabilitation. Parents were fined thousands of euros. Some parents even fled to the US and got asylum in Tennessee through some judges there. But what we did, we still unschooled. We didn't go to school, and we kind of flew under the radar there, right? We didn't exit the home until about 2 p.m. or 2:30, which was when the children would be out of school by then. And there was like a tennis club right across from us. And so we would rush over there about 2:30 a.m. And people were like, wow, you get out of school fast. We're like, oh yeah, we're just quick. And, so that was kind of my upbringing. So I was always like counterculture and had a little disrespect for authority, just by the nature of, everything. But still never went to a pediatrician, never had a well child check, or never really had any interaction with the medical system. My parents raised me through, Chinese medicine, nutrition, where if the child was sick, it was what did the child eat that made them sick? Oh, they had sugar. That's why they were misbehaving. They had a congestion and runny nose, or they probably ate some pasteurized dairy. So, a lot of time, for a lot of my childhood, we weren't allowed pasteurized dairy products until much later on in life when I learned about the, heating milks and how that denatures the amino acids and it decreased the enzymes involved. So you can't digest it as well. Now we can all consume milk in our family without pasteurization process, but growing up, no milk. Poor, us in Italy, no gelato is a struggle. You don't understand. But even like mainstream pediatricians understand that a child that's super congested, you get them off the dairy products and they won't be as congested anymore. So even the conventional pediatrician understands this. And then we moved to the US in about 2008 because, what Italy, Germany, great and all, but it grows old after a time because it's hard for someone who hasn't lived there to understand, but there's less freedoms there in many different ways. The homeschooling thing is just an obvious way. But, it's difficult to start a business. There's a lot of taxes, there's a lot of regulations. I mean, Italy is stifled with regulations. The medical doctors there, their hands are tied to the system. They can't really think outside the box lest they, get their license revoked. And they can't prescribe hormones and stuff unless they're, endocrinologists. So what I'm doing here would never have been possible in Europe. So for many reasons, we chose to settle in the US, here in Florida, in Melbourne Beach. And we just continued what we had always been doing, which was unschooling. But here they had great programs. We went to college, university. My brother went at age 13, and I started at age 15 at the local college here doing courses and prerequisites for medical. We knew we wanted to do something medicine. And still unschooled, still competed in tennis at the highest level. But the reason we chose medical is, we went to Walmart and we just saw how sick everyone was. And Americans were a lot fatter than the European population. So mom's like, well, this looks like job security, so you guys should go into medicine. So that's where we were going. And then it was like, which way did you want to do? Did you want to do the MD? Did you want to do a PA? Luckily, I had a really smart mentor, an MD, who got me my first job in the ER as a scribe. And I told him, I want to be an anesthesiologist. And he said, do you really want to pass gas for the rest of your life? And I was like, no. He was like, you should become a PA, and because it's probably going to be the best thing for you. And that's exactly what I did. After graduating UCF with a bachelor's in sports and exercise science, I worked as a personal trainer at LA Fitness. And through that kinesiology education, my understanding of, diet, I helped a lot of patients lose weight, reverse their metabolic syndrome, A1C going down. I remember this one patient, or client, I should say, at the time, because I was a trainer. She went to her MD, and he looked at the numbers, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Well, I hired this trainer." And he's like, "Well, keep him," because the A1C was going down, and she was getting stronger. So he's super happy with that. So I essentially I infiltrated the medical system, right? Because I wasn't brainwashed at all. I kind of knew already going in. I mean, I had a bit of a glamorized idea because I'd worked in the ER, and I thought that was the best thing ever. You could actually help people there. Um, Later on, I learned that the problems that came to the ER, they were entirely preventable with lifestyle change. Essentially, most of the problems that go to the ER, they're non-emergencies. They're just chronic conditions that got out of control without lifestyle intervention. But I wanted to do ER, and after PA school, I thought I wanted to do ER because I excelled in ER there. I was one of my best rotations. It wasn't pediatrics, man. I mind you that. I got a bit of trouble for giving parents risk benefits analysis of vaccines. You're not supposed to do that. I learned that the hard way. So I got held
Yeah,
back.
that's not popular among pediatrics.
No, you can't give risk benefits. So I got held back a little bit, had to repeat some. So that was rough. They didn't like me very much up in Massachusetts. They were very like singular minded about things. Yeah. So I got out of there as fast as I could. The funny story about passing the pants, all PAs have to take this national board exam. And I went to the testing center. I'd been studying for this test for weeks, and they said, "Oh, our systems are down. You can't take this test." I'm like, "What? This is like very difficult test to do, to schedule." And they're like, "Well, tough luck." So I called up the scheduling system, and I said, "Where can I take this test tomorrow?" And they're like, "Well, Philadelphia." So I threw all my stuff in my car that I've been living there for 3 years, and I didn't look back. I'm like, I'm out of here. Let me get out of Massachusetts. So when Dr. Tro, he wanted me to come to New York, I was like, no, I can't. He wanted me to come at one point to come see what he was doing up there. I can't do the Northeast, man. I don't know how you do it.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I'm curious. So you saw the power of sort of prevention and not really buying into the herd and sort of thinking for yourself. And I'm just curious, is your family very lean? Are they also very lean? Are they also very healthy? And do you have any siblings? Do you have any, tell us about your extended family.
Yeah.
Are they like athletes also?
No,
Tell me a little about that.
no, my parents were outliers. My dad and I were discussing this. When you're a European and you leave the home country, my dad's German as can be. He's a German aerospace engineer, but he left. He's a leaver. He's one of the Europeans that are leavers. So when you're a European leaver, you don't think like the others do. So yeah, no, his family is not doesn't think like him. And then my mom is also a leaver, but in the opposite direction. She was in the US all her life in Oklahoma, but she left the US and she went to Germany, and that's where she met my dad. So she was a leaver as well. So the two of them are the healthiest in both their families. And the rest of the families, metabolic disease, standard. All right. I actually did a test on my dad the other day. It's called the glycan age test. It's a test, a longevity age test. My dad has an age of 25, glycan age. He's over 60. So, I mean, he's here. He's put in the work. He's doing cold plunge every day at my office here at the gym. He works outdoors, works outside. Like we have a gym, it's outside, so you get sunlight. He does sauna every day. So my parents are here every day with me training. and they eat
Yeah,
super
I'd love
clean.
to hear about, tell us, because you've told me, but tell us about your practice, what it looks and feels like. You kind of hinted at what's there. You told me it's like a compound.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I can show you, but like right outside my window there is my gym, and I have a bike there. And then outside, I can give you a tour maybe a little bit later. It's
Most people listen, so that's all right. Just describe it because it's not typical, right? You don't
uh,
walk in, you don't have a bunch of TVs and magazines, right? Like in the waiting room. Like
no.
just can you just describe what it's like for your patients right now? They sign up with you just because it's unique and I want people to hear it.
It
What's
is.
possible.
So we're right here in Indy Atlantic. It's beachside of Florida. We have a view of the river and the ocean is in walking distance. And it's actually a 130-year-old home. Back before it was all developed, it was a pineapple plantation. So this was one of the original pineapple houses. So people walk in here and the waiting room, it feels like a home. It actually smells like coffee typically because we're making coffee here, espresso. There's a bunch of books out there on metabolic health and anti-aging. And they come into the office and, there's a couple of providers here. There's Jason, there's Lauren, there's my wife Logan, there's me. So we all see patients here. And we have a root cause approach, a functional whole approach to the patient. We practice functional medicine, direct primary care, right? So when patients come to us, we'll take care of a laceration and infection, but we'll also treat their metabolic health, right? We're going to get them on a right diet. We're going to optimize their hormones, their vitamins, their sleep, the water they're drinking, mycotoxins, Lyme, you name it. We treat it, we assess it. There's nothing we really don't do, and we rarely send patients out to specialists, um, maybe for a colonoscopy or something. But we try to manage everything in house. And then in the back is my project. I call it the Human Performance Arena because I always wanted patients to be in that gym environment. Actually, before I could afford the rent on this office, I rented a small room inside a gym. So every time that the patients came to see me, they had to walk by all the bodybuilders hitting the bench press and grunting. Like, 80-year-old lady walking by, doesn't matter. Everybody has to see it and get that in their mind because I want everybody to understand that the muscle is medicine. It's critical, right?
Yeah, you
Yes.
look at the data on longevity and long-term survival. Muscle mass is a huge, huge factor. It's the biggest factor. And when we're looking at, you know, smoking and drinking and all those kinds of things, having muscle mass is a huge, huge factor that we've totally missed out on in Western medicine, I think.
Yeah, and I give this a lecture. It's called the muscle-centric medicine approach. I give it to physicians all the time. Their minds are blown every time I give this lecture. I just explain the mechanism of how, essentially the muscle is a storage of energy. And if you can make the muscle more robust, the food that you eat, it stores more appropriately in the muscle in the form of glycogen. And then when you train, it releases in the form of glucose to sustain your energy. And I try to get this into the heads of all my patients, is that if you make yourself stronger, bigger, more muscular, you're going to, improve your triglycerides, you're going to improve your glucose, you're going to reverse the insulin resistance. Your fasting insulin will go down because you don't need to release a ton of insulin all the time to lower your blood sugar because your body knows what to do with it. Insulin takes those amino acids, glucose, stores it in the muscle for energy. And so if we can get all the patients muscular, you're going to reverse all the metabolic diseases, all the cardiometabolic, cardiovascular, cancer even. Cancer reduces, 13% reduction in cancer when you start strength training. Alzheimer's, that's reduced. One thing I like to do with my patients is I bring them outside to my gym and I put them on the Olympic rings. And if you put a patient on Olympic ring and you have them do a push-up, what you'll see is this. It looks like an essential tremor where their hands are shaking. And so patients, they come to me and they say, I want to lose 20 pounds. I'm like, all right, we have to reassess and reframe that. You want to lose fat and you want to gain muscle. And in that process, you may not lose a whole bunch of weight initially. The first thing that develops is your brain. You actually get smarter when you start on any strength and conditioning program. So that essential tremor on the Olympic rings, over time, it's suddenly smooth. They could do an Olympic ring or a dumbbell press without shaking. And the reason that happens, you develop new nerve connections from your muscle to your brain. So if you do fMRI or MRI studies on these patients who do strength training programs over months, they actually gain white matter in their brain. So that's why it's preventative towards prevention of Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline with age.
Yeah, plus it's lowering the blood sugar, plus it's reducing visceral fat, and all the interleukins involved with that. I cannot stress. I put out a poll, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think would be the result. I put it out on social media. I put it out in the Toward Health app. We got 1,000 responses, and I said you have to pick one. You could either be strong and obese or weak and lean. What do you think people chose?
I
Brian,
think I
you
think
could
they
go
would
first
choose
and
I
Stefan.
think they would choose weak and lean, but that's the wrong choice.
Yeah, it's a wrong choice, but that's what I think most people would pick because obviously they're all shooting up GLP-1s that are making them weak and lean.
Yeah, it was split down the middle.
Oh,
Oh.
I think
really? Wow.
500 people out of 1,000 said, I'm going to be weak and lean, and 500 people said, I'd rather be strong and obese. But I think this plays at the mind that like so many people have been suffering so long. They're like, I want to lose weight. They've been trying to lose weight for 40 years, 50 years. Gosh, and you get them, you see them, and you do some basic blood work, like you mentioned, their gut microbiome's out of whack. They're nutritionally deficient. I've seen single digit vitamin D levels, and their folate level non-existent, vitamin C level non-existent. You check all the micronutrients, not even there. And they're like, I want to lose 20 pounds. And I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to lose 100 pounds. I'm like, I don't think you understand. You're starving. I don't think you understand, you're starving. You need to actually eat and then actually fuel your tissues, like your muscle, like your brain. So do you find this like paradigm? They see you. I mean, you're in great shape. Like they see your family probably also in great shape, on the compound, and they see all your patients working out. Is this like a culture shock for them?
It is a culture shock, and I have to always repeat myself and motivate patients because they'll sit here and I show them that they're insulin resistant. I say, you need to start lifting weights. And they're like, can I do that at home? Is like, you've never picked up a barbell or a dumbbell in your life. You think you're just going to suddenly start doing this? And I always recommend a trainer to at least start out and to it's both the trainer is going to oversee it, but it's also like a financial commitment. It's like, okay, you paid for it, so you have to go do it. That whole just like trying to do it by yourself at home, it just never cuts out. Or the patient tells me, I walk at work for exercise. I hear that one all the time. And it's like, no, walking gets you from point A to point B, but we're talking about strength training, progressive overload of the muscle, where you consistently increase the weight over weeks in a structured manner to stimulate the muscle to grow. This is what we're talking about. It's completely different than just, walking around someplace. People focus too much on trying to lose weight through cardio. I'm just going to go run it off. Now, the reason I can maintain a lean mass relatively easily is when I eat a really good diet, I train consistently, but my basal metabolic rate is crazy high. I got a BMR test done. It's about 3,400 calories I burn every day just sitting around here talking to you guys. It's an insane amount of calories I burn. And it's because I'm mostly muscle. My body fat percent is about 14 to 16%. Um, so it's a lot of muscle and it sustains me through burning a bunch of calories all day long. And so this is the mindset we need to switch in our patients. We have to switch it from I just need to walk it off or I need to eat less to I need to make myself from the Toyota Prius into the Ford F-150 gas guzzler. You want to be a little bit more energy inefficient in our modern day, right? It's not how we evolved, but it's how we need to be now, energy inefficient.
Yeah, and mitochondrial decoupling, right? And we talk about some of these things that we can do, and some of the things you're doing, like the sauna and the cold plunges. All these things make you have to tap into your metabolic system, and your metabolism.
Right.
I'm curious, like, how did you come from a non-interventional approach, right? And non-interventional sort of upbringing. You mentioned, no well child visits, never seeing a pediatrician, never seeing a doctor, having you drinking real milk and then, probably in your 20s, you start to see modern medicine. And modern medicine, and I know what you learned for the sort of the PA licensure exam, and it's a lot of pharmacology, it's a lot of procedures.
Yeah.
So how did you feel sort of delving into the other side? And how did you reconcile all of that, right? How did you reconcile that in your heart? Sounds like, no meds, or little meds, real food, lifestyle first. But now you have this whole knowledge base about a whole bunch of drugs and a whole bunch of, surgeries and procedures. And, so help me understand how you went about assimilating all that.
Well, I tried to do the conventional route, but trying to apply my functional medicine expertise to it. But the first job I got was internal medicine and urgent care. And in the urgent care, every patient I saw in there, I would ask them about their diet. And like, what did you eat? What do you eat typically? How many beers are you drinking? What vitamins are you taking? And I would change some lives that way. And some light bulbs would go off, especially in this particular urgent care where patients were seemingly very receptive to it. Typically, they're not most urgent cares, but it was like a good population there. Um, then the pandemic hit, and I studied the mechanism of the pathology much deeper because there wasn't a treatment available. So I went right into the literature. I was looking at what's the mechanism, how can we modulate the inflammatory cytokine response, what repurposed medicines and what vitamins can we use for this? And that led to hours and hours of study of how to use these things. And I developed the early treatment protocol within a couple weeks of the pandemic hitting the US, and I treated thousands of patients with the COVID protocol, the FLCCC protocol. I developed it before the FLCCC. And I was very successful with this. However, it wasn't always appreciated. And so I kind of got pushed out of that urgent care. And I wound up doing spine surgery. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do spine surgery instead. I can't do medicine. I have to do, something different where, I still have to use my license. I'm in 100 plus K in debt. I have to pay it off. So I worked in spine surgery. And when you work in pain management, you see the same metabolic diseases just presenting in pain. So again, I was asking about diet. I was asking about lifestyle. I was asking about vitamin intake, and they didn't really care so much. They also allowed me to do a bit of functional medicine practice there. So I was starting to see patients, and I was building a functional medicine practice. But as a PA, you're the first to let go when revenue is down. So that was out. But luckily, that whole time I was doing this side gig. I was working for an app. It was a diabetic app where the project was I was supposed to release a lecture every week on on teaching diabetics how to reverse their metabolic syndrome naturally with lifestyle and diet. And so this allowed me to get paid to study functional medicine. So I just went through the research. I just looked at the data, the PubMed, and I just put together hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of academic CME level lectures for patients. And this was great and allowed me to learn so much deeper and help a lot of people that way too through this app. Through this job, I got a job in psychiatry, of all things, right? Same thing in psychiatry, metabolic disease, the diet, it was influencing their depression, their anxiety. I was getting patients off of their ADHD pills with ketogenic diets. I was reversing their depression with carnivore and keto diets. You know what happened? Because this was a telemedicine job. I was working from home in Florida, in Massachusetts, all right? I got called up. My license was threatened by registered dietitians. They threatened to report me to the state for giving patients dietary advice. They said I was going to harm patients this way. I was like, I'm getting them off their psychoactive substances. What are you talking about? So yeah, registered dietitians. I know you've had your battles with them too, Dr. Tro.
A lot
Yeah,
of
I think we
battles.
all have. I think we all have. And you go, gosh, like if it's working and the patient's getting better, why don't we give it some time and look? And I think that's one of those things. And, I just had the pleasure of interviewing someone in functional medicine who's more on the vegan side. And we had a great, great discussion. And she said, like, right before I came on, like, I saw what you did and I was like, oh my gosh, like, like, we're not going to get along. But when you start looking at it, go, okay, can we agree on certain things? Like, do we agree that let's get rid of processed food and let's work on stress and sleep and all these things that we could come to a common ground on? And then you could follow whatever side of the spectrum you want to fall on.
Yeah, but so we should be very careful, right? When we talk about, veganism, we're not talking about nutrition, right?
Yeah.
So we shouldn't conflate the two. If you want to be unprocessed and plant-based, right? Because you care for animals, that's different, right?
Yeah,
That's a
there's
moral,
ethical
ethical
reasons.
thing,
Yeah, moral, ethical.
right?
That's what I ask people straight up. Are you doing it for health reasons or are you doing it for ethical reasons or religious reasons, right? And then we can kind of fine tune what we're doing.
Ethical reasons, religious reasons, there's not much to do there. It's like, happy with you and your religion, happy with you and your ethics, but when it comes to nutrition, I really think we got to be careful. We got to be really careful. The brain needs, animal-based food and fat.
Yes.
Like I don't think we should, so I think we should be very careful, but you're
Well, I
right.
think it's
There is common
supporting
ground,
someone. I think it's supporting someone where they're at. They go, look, I'm not going to eat animal products. Like, okay, would you do eggs? Can we look at the importance of choline? Look at the importance of these different nutrients, right? So, can we add in fats through the form of avocados or olives or olive oil, that kind of stuff, or coconut oil? So, there is a spectrum for sure. And you go, how do I support that person where they're at? And maybe over time they go, I'm feeling so much better. Maybe I do add in eggs or add in animal proteins and things like that. If you say, look, that you're on your own, and because you can't say, hey, cut out the processed food because you could be vegan and eat
I meant the
Oreos all day.
doctor because you said you had a doctor on that was it was a
A
doc, it
functional
was a
medicine trainer, basically, like a coach,
you
a health coach, right?
Mm.
got it. Okay.
But she doesn't discourage. She goes, look, I don't talk about this is what I personally do, but for religious or whatever reason, but I don't tell my people that's how they have to eat. So she does introduce proteins and animal products and all those kind of things. But
Well, kudos to
say
her.
eat only
Rare.
meat and yeah, totally. And we had a great
Yeah,
discussion based on that because you go, okay, what, because I mean, we could always learn and say, hey, what's working, what's not working, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 100%, absolutely. Always willing to learn, but I just wonder, how much we've like accepted, like, when it comes to nutrition, we've tried to like play the middle ground. A lot of people try to play the middle ground, and I wonder how much harm that actually causes. Like, we've not that we should penalize, the dietetics and the academics that are, pro plant-based, but I don't think they've been exactly forthcoming with their intentions. Is it a moral or ethical thing? Fine. Is it a religious thing? Fine. But don't try to conflate, the two, right? Like, and then I
Mm-hmm.
find that whole discussion a little disingenuous. But anyway, well, I don't know. What do you think, Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, I had a talk yesterday giving the muscle centered medicine approach, and I had a vegan doctor asking me what he thought about the vegan diet. And I was like, well, you're gonna be fatigued. You're gonna lose bone mass, muscle mass. It's not evolutionarily compatible with humanity, right? You take, for example, the stomach acidity of the human stomach. The pH is 1.3, 1.5. The bald eagle and the red-tailed fox, their pH in the stomach is about 1.3 to 1.5. But you can turn the human into essentially the deer. So the deer and the elephant have a pH of about 4.4 to 5. But if you prescribe a human omeprazole, you'll turn their stomach acidity up. It'll go to about a pH of 4 to 5, upwards of 8 even, depending on the dose. So the red-tailed fox, bald eagle, they eat carrion. They eat raw meats. So the acidity of our stomach is meant to digest raw meat. It's not designed to digest plants like deer. You explain it like that, it makes a lot of sense to a vegan, maybe, unless they
Mm-hmm.
have cerebral atrophy and white matter atrophy from lack of B12.
Yeah, so we're talking about overall health, and that plays out in the literature. if you look at the sort of the mental health impacts, I would never want to force anybody to eat anything, but I want to like I've seen too many people essentially die at the hands of the brainwashing from avoiding meat. And it's a bit triggering, I got to be honest, it's a bit triggering. Do you get a lot of that, Brian, in your practice, or do you see a lot of that in your practice, Stefan?
No, I think because of our practices, we've self-selected, I think, for a certain population of people who are going to come seek us and say, look, tell me what I can do to be the healthiest, because that's always been my concern. And I've noticed in my entire career, and I don't want to be political about it, but this is what I saw: increased depression, increased anxiety. And I saw it, and I'm like, okay, is it because people who are more anxious and like philosophically want to fight the system type thing, are they more likely to become vegan, or is it because a result of the diet itself? And I think over time, I've talked to a lot of people. I go, first 2 or 3 years, I felt great. And then all of a sudden, depression, anxiety, stress, fractures, whatever it is. And you go, okay, you got to change something at that point, right? So I think a lot of people have changed out. I mean, it's a rare exception that I see someone who used to be carnivore switch over to be vegan or something. And then I see a ton of vegans who go, you know what? I was feeling like crap and I changed what I was doing and I feel better. So I think it's a hard thing because you got to get your nutrition somewhere. And it just turns out that I saw a lot of people get metabolically sick and diabetic. And part of it's loss of muscle mass. Part of it is maybe mental and anxiety and stress. All these things we know make you more metabolically sick. And so you go, okay, loss of muscle mass, I think, is the huge factor. Like that, exactly what you're talking about, Stefan, is that, if you lose muscle mass, it's never going to be a benefit to you. The only time it's a benefit to lose muscle is if bad times are coming and you're going to starve to death, right? Because muscle is going to, like you're saying, you're burning way more calories than other people are because you have so much muscle mass. So the thing is, if you're stressed and tense and hate the world and you don't go have fun sometimes, guess what? Cortisol goes up and you break down muscle to make sugar. That's not a good trade-off. Even excessive exercise, if you're very thin, can be an issue. And Tro, we've talked about it. Sometimes adding in some berries or sweet potatoes, things like that into their diet, cutting back on the exercise, their sugar, triglycerides, everything, all their stress hormones get better and their mood gets better.
Yes.
I think it's always individual, always individual. It's always an individualized approach. I think it's tough but I think common things are common, 93% have metabolic syndrome, right? That means 93% of people can reduce processed carbohydrates. Let's just plant-based carbohydrates and plant-based sugar, right? 93% of people can reduce those with their eyes closed. So if a doc just closed their eyes and took 100 people, 93% of the time he'd be right if he said, reduce your carbohydrates, reduce your plant-based carbohydrates and sugar, right? And 7% of the time he'd be, maybe not right, but still pretty darn healthy, right? And then but you get these people, who are like, well, what about, yeah, and anorexia or eating disorders and all that,
Yeah.
I think it's a non-issue,
Well, yeah, that's what I got out of those dietitians there. That was their reasoning. Like I was gonna give somebody an eating disorder. I'm like, "Bah, I'm fixing them. I mean, they're getting better. So
Don't they already have one by the time they got to us?
Yeah.
Right? If your sugars are 400, you've got an eating disorder because you shouldn't be eating carbohydrates if your sugar's 400. There's something wrong already.
Yeah, but that's not their worldview. The worldview is they're obese and they have to cut their calories and they lack willpower and it's genetics, right? So they view you as inducing an eating disorder because they don't understand modern disease, right? And so it's like dealing with crazy people. It's truly like dealing with crazy people, in
It
my
is.
opinion.
I
Sorry.
mean, the one thing I can't, uh, and I think those people like Spencer Nadolsky on Twitter, I think they understand this, but they're so focused on the calorie in, calorie out. But it's like, okay, you eat 100 calories of beef liver and you eat 100 calories of Doritos. Okay, just those two. I mean, even though the same calories, it's going to take more energy to digest the beef liver. You're going to extract a lot more vitamins, iron, B12, folate, vitamin A from the beef liver. That nutrition is going to provide satiety. It's going to trigger that satiety reflex for the brain, for the stomach. So you won't eat as much. Meanwhile, you're going to eat tons of Doritos. Yes, you could restrict yourself. And you can only give yourself 100 calories of Doritos, but you're not going to be happy with it either.
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous model. Like it should be the last thing you consider, right? Like, is the body nourished first and foremost, right? Are the processed carbohydrates and sugars fairly low? You know, is this person snacking or eating frequently? You know, are they moving their body? Right. And then, how's their sleep, their mental health, their stress? How are they managing stress? Do they turn to food to manage these things? And if you've done all those things, people are eating real food, generally low carb. They're eating infrequently, right? They're moving their body, they're lifting weights, they're building muscle, right? They're sleeping great, right? And then they're still having a difficulty. Yes, maybe consider, using a regimented approach to eating, whether it's counting calories or cutting portions or
Yes.
extended fasts or whatever it is.
Well, and Stefan hit it on the head right at the beginning, saying, "Hey, I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Put him on Ritalin, with no dietary change, no stress management change, no counseling, whatever it might be. But it's the easy way out. It's the same thing we do in medicine. It's like, okay, you have high blood pressure, you got GERD, you got here, give him that medicine for blood pressure, one for GERD, one for that. It's like, wait a minute, let's step back. Why do we have all these dysfunction going on? Let's look at the root cause and see why do we have this, right?
Yeah, the didn't have ADHD. I was a young boy who had a lot of energy,
Normal
wanted to
energy
fight
kid, right?
people.
Yeah, exactly, right.
That's
So
what I
you find a
recommend to
new
my patient.
focus
I
for
see
that.
pediatrics here. If I see that all the time, I see myself there sitting on that couch across from me pretty often. I'm like, yeah, take him out of school and put him in judo or karate or what, name it. I mean, little boys, unfortunately, are oftentimes not meant to sit at a desk for 8 hours. That's the hard truth.
Hmm. Yeah, take them out for hikes, go do stuff, educate them
You
for a
know,
little while, take a break, go do
it's
things.
it's
Yeah, for
crazy,
sure.
like an unmedicated ADHD, graduating with a degree in exercise science, becoming a PA, successful sort of leader in his community. What a testament to how poorly modern psychiatry has handled mental health. I'm just like thinking about your story and like going back. They took you out of school and they said there's something wrong with your kid because he's a little aggressive and he's not able to be attentive.
Right.
Like what a poor inability to way to handle men,
Right. Men.
right? What a poor inability way to like mentor. Like your parents took you and they mentored you. They mentored you because the school couldn't,
Right.
right? The school couldn't, and it's like it's so easy. It's so easy with love and care to just sort of, and like a little bit of good, solid nutrition, good guidance, moving your body, right? And what a story about overcoming mental health that's in your story here that we didn't even touch, because you could have been on drugs after drug after drug, finding your way to substances,
Yes.
and never sort of reaching where you've reached. Like
Exactly.
like that, like the most men today,
Right. No, the
unfortunately.
ADHD, I don't think I have that. I just have my brain works in ways that create solutions very quickly. I'm a very quick problem solver. That's why I am where I am today and I've had this successful practice. I make things happen very quickly.
Well, if you look at, most entrepreneurial business leaders, their mind is working at a mile a minute,
Yeah.
right? There's been so many books about, every visionary business leader, including Steve Jobs, had quote unquote ADHD. ADHD, when you're trying to lock up a kid in a classroom for 8 hours and tell them to keep them to themselves and feed them chocolate milk and then, expect good outcomes. That's that's the problem, right? It's not the ADHD, right? It's
That
it's
metabolic disease, it happens very early on in life. It's when every teacher, every party, every social activity becomes junk food, right? It becomes a reward, right? They're gonna have the club sandwiches, they're gonna have the Snicker bars, the candy, every festivity, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthday, every birthday party, it becomes cake, cookies. So that metabolic disease, that's happening at the first birthday party. That's happening at every school event. And I think the teachers, they use candy as like a reward system to reward good behavior. But what that does is just you give them red 40, they're crawling up the walls, they're getting worsening mental health disease. So that metabolic disease, that's happening very early on in life. And parents need to be quite aware of that and when it starts.
It's not just, you mentioned the red 40 and you mentioned as a reward. It's not even as a reward. It is an everyday event,
Yeah.
right? Our modern food, there's ice cream every day in the cafeterias.
Yeah.
It is Tostitos for lunch, right? It is an everyday event that is an onslaught on our children. And then we look to medicate, and then we bind them up in these classes, and then we medicate them, right? I think what we're doing is like the biggest travesty ever. And your story is so powerful. I don't know, Brian, what you're smiling over there. Hopefully, I'm not
No, I'm
too.
just laughing because I'm thinking while we're talking about all this stuff, is like, what do we do with the kids? What do we do to our seniors during the COVID? You lock them up, they have no social, all these things we know that will kill someone. Like if you take away socialization, I mean, that is a huge, huge factor, right? In longevity and health. Lock them in a room, make them scared, make them think if they breathe the air of someone else, they're gonna die. All these things we did, not talk about vitamin D, right? Not talk about proper nutrition. So and it's kind of like the same things we did with the kids is that you put them in a school all day, they're under blue lights, they're not, a lot of places are cutting out physical PE and recess, they're shortening up because they want to go teach them crazy stuff, brainwash the kids. But I think it's this, when you get them doped up and dumb and they're eating terrible nutrition, you look at all these school lunch programs, you go, oh my gosh. My wife was just showing me, she goes, look at this. This is the school lunch for this local school. And you look at it as like, there's nothing of nutritional value in there. It's goldfish and it's like Jello and all this kind of stuff, soda. And you go, wow. And then we wonder why we're like failing our kids so bad, so poorly.
The rationalization is, well, the homeschooler and unschooler, they're unsocial, right? They don't get socialized, right? That was what people and relatives questioned my mom for doing it. This is not the truth. I was very active in social activities. I was very active in sports, judo, tennis. It was my entire life. So you don't need to go to school to have social activities.
You know what? I mean, I'm just like, we got to get this guy to RFK, man. Stefan, we got to get you to RFK. What a testament to how poorly our modern lifestyle is compared to what it could be. And I'm not saying what your parents did for you is feasible for everybody, but we could take one step towards that direction. Like get two PE classes outdoors, right? So these kids can expend some energy, right? Drop the snack time, right? Just drop the snack time.
Yeah.
Simple, save money.
Right.
Give them, like give them a piece of meat for lunch.
It's cheaper.
Or fish, like just
What
save
days
money.
what days at New York is vegan Friday or Monday or something? What do you
Oh
guys
my
got,
God,
Terrell?
it's Meatless Monday and Vegan
Meatless
Friday.
Monday. And
What
what?
a terrible thing, man. What a terrible thing. What
Meatless Monday. What is it on Friday?
it's Vegan Friday and
Oh,
Meatless
vegan
Monday.
Friday. Meatless
Yeah,
Monday.
Man, I couldn't
yeah,
do it. New York's nuts. Can't do it.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's some good things. There's some good things about New York, but that's not one of them.
No.
That's not one of them. Listen, this has been such a pleasure. I'm wondering, it's to the top of the hour. I always got like 15 other questions. And then the minute I'm like, it's time, Brian hits us with like one or two more questions. So, Brian, I'll let you hit one or
Yeah,
two
well,
questions. And then,
I mean, obviously your iron direct primary care, talking about lifting and doing all these things. For seniors, why is muscle so important? What are the big things that you would tell someone who's listening that's, a senior like me, I guess 55 and over, like why does muscle matter so much?
It matters so much. And I'm not even when I talk to patients, I often talk to their children. I'm like, are you investing in your parents' health, right? You invest in the stock market, you invest in 401k, you invest in your Roth IRA. Are you investing in your parents' health? Because if you're not getting them to the gym, if you're not getting them to train right, guess what? That nursing home bill is $20,000 a month. There goes your inheritance, right? It's gone, right? And then besides that, they're gonna die earlier. If your mom has a pathological fracture, a hip fracture, the chances of her dying after that is 50% within the next 5 years. So you have to invest early in your health. And yeah, it's expensive initially, but $20,000 a month nursing home bill is bankruptcy. That's it. And that's how my grandmother on my mom's side went. Type 2 diabetes, poorly controlled, nursing home, Alzheimer's, that's type 3 diabetes. What were they feeding her at the nursing home? The one thing that she could remember, she couldn't remember me, my mom, nobody, but she knew she wanted sugar. And so they would give her the sugar cubes and she would put 6 sugar cubes in her coffee in the morning. And then they gave that to her and gave her her insulin because that's what you do. You have to eat sugars so that you can use your insulin, right? That's the modern end of
Yeah.
so that was her life, and she didn't know any of her family for about 20 years. But she's modern medicine kept her alive, but she knew no one for 20 years, and no money until Medicare does pick up the tab eventually, but it exhausts the bank account first. So that people don't understand that little secret. The bank account needs to exhaust first before Medicare picks up the tab. So it's not taken care of, right?
Yeah, I'm learning that with my parents too. I know we're at the top of the hour just about, but I think this is so important. My dad, my stepmom had a stroke about a year and a half ago. He sat there at her bedside and, she's hemiplegic, ends up dying, but he sat there for a year and a half, totally decompensated. I'm like, you got to work out, Dad. You got to walk. You got to move. And now we got him into an assisted living. He's independent, but he's in an assisted living. He's riding his bike at least three to 5 miles a day. He's going out and socializing with people. He's going out and sitting out in the sun. He's doing stuff again, and you can see a difference in his mentation, his strength, his walking ability, all these things. And you go, if you like, and I thought when I went there, because I'm saying the same thing. I looked around. I'm like, all these people are broken. It's like when they say don't fix it until it's broken. If it's not, don't fix it if it's not broken. That's when you fix it before it's broken, because once it's broken, it's so much harder to come back.
It's
So doing what we're doing is saying, hey, look, let's focus on stress, sleep, exercise, getting on the sun, laughing, having fun, all these kind of things. That people are just going to do that much better. Nutrition's a factor, because if you're eating the wrong stuff all the time, you're going to be more stressed and anxious, brain inflammation, all these things we're talking about with metabolic health. It's embarrassing almost, because people go, well, does metabolic health affect Parkinson's? Yeah. Does it
Yes.
affect Alzheimer's disease? Does it affect, you name it, everything we're treating right now, diabetes, of course,
Yeah.
and all these things, you go, yeah, they're all metabolic in nature. I mean, I don't see very many exceptions unless you get an infection somewhere, and even that's metabolic a lot
Oh
of times
no,
if you're
I was
metabolically healthy.
I was dealing with a patient this past week. That wound is 100% metabolically driven. And I explained this to the patient. I'm like, the reason this wound is as bad as it is, you bumped into a couch, it wasn't anything crazy, is because of longstanding metabolic insulin resistance, elevated fasting insulin, obesity. So most infections are metabolically driven. I mean, with rare, trauma from, get stabbed or something, right?
Mhm. Yeah, all these things they roll back to the same thing. So it's like what you're saying is like, man, if you take, because my dad said, well, how can I help with the finances? I'm going to take care of yourself, because the worse you get, the more it's going to cost those kids, right? We're going to have to pitch in to make sure someone wipes your butt if you don't get up off your butt and move. So all these things, and it's tough love to an extent, but it's like, this is the reality. If you sit there, you're going, everything stiffens up. It's hard to get up. And then sooner or later it hurts too much and you don't get up. And then boom, you're laying in a bed for 20 years and not know who anyone
It's
is.
something very different that we have to wrap our minds around in, white Western culture, is we don't take care of our parents. It's like, oh, we're out of the house. They have their social security. It's out of our hands. It's not the truth. Like a lot of other cultures, in Asian cultures, Indian culture, they take care of their parents. I don't know if they take care of them with a muscle-centric medicine approach like I do, but that's what I try to tell all my patients. Like, listen, your parents, they need to stay healthy, because if they're not healthy later on in life, they're not going to be able to help you, like, watch your kids, take care of you. You want your parents there as long as possible, and you don't want them to be sick in the medical system, just going to specialist circles all day long. They're going to spend less time with you, and they're going to drain their own bank accounts, and you're probably going to have to help them out as well. So it's a financial investment in both yourself and your parents.
Absolutely. And having your parents know who you are. As a matter of fact, this is why it's so important. I bet someone, I happened to be at an Alzheimer's dinner thing, and I was talking to this couple, and this lady was super nice, but her mom, she was an only child, so her and mom were super close, and she brought her mom to live with them. And she said, for the last 2 weeks, my mom doesn't know who I am. Like she doesn't know my name, doesn't know who I am. And we go, let's try, I'll just do, since they're not sponsoring this podcast, I said, let's get her on some health code. Let's try some different nutrition for her and get her off the crap that you're getting her from Nestle or whatever and see
Yeah.
what happens. Her mom knows who she is now, and she's
Wow.
more functional. She's engaging with the grandkids now, and she's like, it's a different thing. And this is short lived. We're just talking right now. So let's decrease the brain inflammation. Let's get some weight bearing exercise in, activities, getting out in the sun, engaging with other seniors, and see what happens. These are things we know benefit people. So it's so frustrating to go, here's one drug, it doesn't really work, but it slows the progression. Good luck. Don't change anything. Right. And what you're saying about the sugar, it's a known fact that people with dementia will keep throwing a bunch of sugar, 6 sugar cubes in their coffee, because it's probably they're trying to get their brains to work. Why don't we try ketones to see if the brains can run on that and see what happens?
Right.
Amen. Amen. We can't, the status quo is just terrible. And it can, from pediatrics to geriatrics, right? It's
And
just
it's
unacceptable.
intro, it's the same mindset that people have that's so frustrating. Because you have a type 1 grid. They say, well, let the kid live their life and have sugar and do all this stuff. I go, look, what's going to happen to them? Look, well, let mom just, like, she's 82 years old. Just let her eat whatever she wants, right? Let her have milkshakes every day. We don't want her to lose too much weight, but you're destroying their brain in the process. Like, that's not love. The love is saying, hey, let's give them good nutrition so that we could get them better and more functional, right? Like, you don't just give up on people. So I'm seeing people that are reversing the ship at a really high level. But the problem is, once the damage is done, like peripheral neuropathy, and ulcers and all that, it's hard to reverse that.
It,
So we have to act early.
it's so cool, like what we do here. Like we'll get calls from patients. They'll call our, my mom acts as my secretary. She'll answer the phone, and they'll call like, well, can you guys help with, name blank? And,
Yeah.
and,
Yes.
and she's like, well, we have a whole comprehensive approach. And like when you understand that, it's kind of like it reinvigorates you to practice medicine again, because you're like, wow, I can treat all these different things because they all really come back to like one thing. And it comes back to like diet, exercise, and optimizing hormones and vitamins. And then wow, you can see things from Parkinson's to diabetes to fatigue to low thyroid to psychiatric disorders, pain, rheumatoid. Everything gets better when you start addressing the root cause. So what we're doing here is so different than the way I was trained, in PA school, where you have 1 week for rheumatology and you have, a block for neurology and a block for orthopedics, where everything's separate and then nothing talks to one another. And then it's like,
Exactly right.
it's all like really one and the same. That fracture, that was caused by, obesity and low hormones and not strength training, but the depression is related to the same thing. And you don't need to see the psychiatrist and the obesity doc. Good primary can like address it all.
Yeah. So true.
100%.
So true.
100%. 100%. Good
So
care,
Stefan,
good
how did
quality care.
how do people track you down
You can
if they
find me
want to be
all
your
over the
patients?
internet. Just type in Iron Direct Primary Care. I'll be on YouTube if they haven't banned me that week. Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, and Iron DPC on X.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for
Awesome,
coming.
man.
All right, good
Yeah,
chatting,
thanks.
guys.